are watching now is a corridor made in a refugee camp by the female refugees. I don't know if you saw it clearly. This corridor is connecting 4 or 5 tents and creating a kind of semi-public space in a camp. I was very much concerned in the last 10 years about the meaning and the function of infrastructure. I think one corridor tells a lot of things, especially if it is a kind of appropriation of a space. This is a camp near to my faculty in south of Turkey. So the faculty, the architecture faculty, I was running for 4 years as a dean, and we were really focusing on kind of social engaged architectural education. I'm a sociologist, I'm not an architect, but I work with architects. With my student, I'm not going to show so much about the refugee camp. There's another discussion maybe, or you can ask me in 2 days more if you're curious. But I was more focusing on the scale of infrastructure and what is the meaning of infrastructure right now, either in rural case or urban. Last 15 years, I was more focused on big cities like Istanbul, focusing on large infrastructure. And when I moved to Southeast, to this little city near Syrian border, we are just 20 minutes to the Syrian border and surrounded with refugee camps. And when we established this architecture faculty, totally my understanding of scale changed, my understanding of ruralism, rural production changed, and also the vision between urbanization and urban. You can see some small rural town which full of urbanization process, but is not urban. You can go to an urban space, it's urban, it's city life, but the urbanization is failing, the cities are failing. So there was, for me, a clear distinction, what I experienced. Just quick few information about this camp. It was a kind of 1,500 people Yazidi refugee camp, which was in a big field in a near highway for 1.5 years. And with my students, we worked on the camp, not designing for them, because my student asked, are we going to design a refugee camp, or are you going to design what they need? And I said, no, they're designing themselves, and we just have to archive what they're designing. So the corridor, the function of the corridor, is not about only connecting from one place to one place. It was that the man in the camp was not allowing their wives and daughters to sit on the front of the tent in public. And so the women, they created semi-public spaces that they can sit in between, outside, and not inside the tent, but also outside. So this is a kind of infrastructure that is connecting few tents, but also creates a space, a semi-public space that people, women especially, can spend time and sit. And the material was wood, blanket, and existing plastic bags. We spoke with Michael in the last few months about what we should focus on and so on. And he asked me a question, I asked him a question. And first thing was what infrastructure, what is the function of the infrastructure? Sometimes infrastructure is a symptom of something else. It hides behind a huge process of network, of actors. And sometimes infrastructures, I'm speaking here every scale, from bridge to a water infrastructure to one wall of a house, can function, those different scale of infrastructure can function as a justification of urban policy, neoliberal policies, can function as rescaling land and affecting the policy. And also it can mean corruption, like the trash movement in Lebanon, for example. You know, it was not only a trash infrastructure issue, it was a kind of, behind it was a kind of a state corruption issue. So I was focusing more on this simple concept, also in the faculty with my student, how can we approach infrastructure in different way? And when I was in last year, I was invited to design faculty of Polytechnic of Hong Kong, and I had a grant from the research grant from the design trust, Hong Kong Design Trust. And I wanted to look into fishing villages of Pearl River Delta, especially to the female labor, fishing women. There are many researchers in Pearl River Delta from our discipline, urbanists, architects, geographers, and it's an era that has been researched and is been still researching a lot. And there are main issues. One is the delta itself. For me, is a huge border infrastructure, and there's a huge 5 cities or 6 cities around. Big cities are huge expansion of urbanization, and small villages that are squeezed in those urbanization process. So border infrastructure was something that I was more experienced in Turkey, in the Syrian border, when I was running the faculty with my colleague and my student, that border infrastructure can mean, in a physical sense, a wall, like a border wall that is being built in Turkey-Syria border right now. It can be also border infrastructure, a structure of solidarity that you provide for people, a kind of structure that that is about collaboration, about engagement. I wanted to look to Pearl River Delta as a delta border infrastructure, and my specific focus was the fishing villages, especially in the west coast, west bank of delta. There were few cases. I think I went around, find 7, 8 fishing villages, which is not easy to find, I think. Even if you get the municipal information from Guangzhou municipality, still you have to physically find those villages, and mostly is accessible by sea. So with the fishing woman and fishing man together, you can visit and research and check the spatial typology of those villages. All are in a different topographically, and also as a community economy, they have a different identity, also historically. I mean, this woman that you see is from a fishing village. She used to be fishing as a woman in the sea. Now she's very old, and she's preparing and separating sea creatures and fishes. And in this village there was a cooperative, she told me, fishing cooperative, that women and males are a member, and they had a common economy about that. But now there's no, the cooperative is dismantled, and they don't have pension anymore, which the cooperative was securing the pension for them, and they are doing some small works like that. The other issue is, of course, Pearl River Delta is not so rich in fish stores and food store anymore. Big infrastructural projects going on, like the Macau Bridge, tunnels, and other transportation, which is harming the sea line, the islands and the villages there too. The woman, I was focusing more on the woman, which was not in the aim for me in the beginning, but I found out they go to fishing, they sell, they by hand, they design the fishing net, and they do by their hand. And behind the villages, mostly, I mean, is on the front, there's a fishing activities that are going on, or organization and storaging and handling, transferring to the fishmongers. So I was very interested with this labor condition, how those small communities are connected to big cities like Guangzhou or Shenzhen, and how the community and people are reorganizing their labors according to that. Behind most of them, each fishing villages, there is farming land, This is a banana farmland. So they acquire their vegetable and other needs from the farmland. Sometimes they sell too, but they focus also on the front and the daily activities, daily economies on fishing. And it was very interesting for me also the borderline in a very small scale, a fishing community as a little village, and behind the village there is a land farming, which is not a liquid production, and then on the front is a fishing and liquid territorial activities going on. This is new houses. There are, I'm sure you know, there are huge projects of housing projects are going on, and also the villages are changing in terms of housing dwelling. I mean, from a small dwelling is transforming into a two-story houses or large housing projects, and small gardening. And you can see the bridge coming towards the village. I think this was last year I shot. I think it will develop in 1 year and will cross above the village, fishing villages. This is the Macau Bridge. Just have the idea of the scale of infrastructure. I have a little 3 minutes video, but maybe it's a short time, I know, in 20 minutes, but I would like to you to make a connection between what I showed in the beginning, the small corridor that's done by refugees, and then huge corridors like that that crosses the Pearl River Delta Sea. The cases are maybe different. I know the specificity of the cases too, but if you look through the discourses of infrastructure, the ontology of infrastructure, it brings many different kind of layer. I have a colleague, Keller Esterling. She would say that infrastructure is not only a simple architectural form, it's something between form and law that affects policy. It affects an extra state craft is going on in the building process, in negotiating the infrastructure, in putting from the infrastructure in cities or in rural areas. It's very difficult for me to use only city or separate rural and urban. I think this is another question also that we can talk in 2 days. For me, it's very blurred. And my last word before going, I have 3 minutes. I have a video, but 3 minutes, just a little I want to show. I just want to say last word. I'm very much interested to threshold architectural infrastructure structures. How, like the corridor, how people create through their own needs threshold structures, and how it functions as a kind of a resistant form. This is also kind of interesting. This is a fishing village, and they're cementing the front. So you can see literally how the front of a village changing into a cement structure. This is a trailer. It's not an end little film I'm doing. It's just a short trailer, a draft I'm sharing with you. Wow, so many.
漂亮是吧？这里一个岛来，这个孤岛，这是一个岛锥，这个岛。
This is a huge building that you see. This huge building is just near, underneath the existing fishing village.
你一般一日做幾多工時間？
做幾擔？
啊？
做3-4擔。
三四
擔都300-400斤。
300-400斤啊！
係啊，擔一擔就1斤。
但係大概要幾耐咧？
擔100斤。
啊，一擔咪100斤。
100斤。
冇錯冇錯。
你一般一日工作幾長時間？
自己功夫做到幾時靚仔？
幾時啊？
要做埋晒為止啦，唔係人哋俾魚你又自己攞到翻嚟又係。
你哋一般去邊度打魚啊？一般去邊度打魚啊？
漲潮啦，
漲潮。
漲潮。
但係去邊啲地方咧？
哇！你車開呢度有啦，一時。
係嘛？唔使去到好遠。
車到開嗰開頭。
係嘛？即係都唔係去好遠。
一啲看咩船咧？好似嗱灣喺呢啲就出過香港外啦。
你嗰隻係大船細船？
我哋細船嚟啫。
細船。
Here we're getting more information about the cooperative that they had once in the village.